Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Rankin Johnson. Hello, sir. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing just great, thank you. And how about you?
So far, so good. Now, before we get started, can you tell folks a little bit about why we should listen to you? You're a lawyer, an expert in criminal law specifically.
Yep, I started practicing criminal law in Oregon in 1996, and
Okay.
since that time, I've been a trial level public defender and an appellate public defender, and I've written books and practice manuals about criminal law and about criminal practice. And so I've been dealing with the law about criminal procedure and police powers for my entire career.
Okay.
I'm glad to talk more about how those things work.
Excellent. And I think that's a subject that's on a lot of parents' minds. I mean, no, some parents expect their kids to have interactions with the criminal justice system. Other parents don't, but a lot of parents end up with their kids talking to police and public defenders and DAs and all of those people at one time or another. So I think one of the best places to start is, what are some of the most common misconceptions about our kids, especially our teens, and the criminal justice system?
So in answering, I'm coming at this as a criminal defense attorney. When I deal with the police, I am viewing the police as the other side, not the bad guys exactly, but the adversaries. And by the time a case comes to my desk, the parties have aligned themselves. I don't see cases where the police are trying to be helpful and that's what happens. So with those caveats in mind, the most important thing is the police are not on your side. They are not going to help you. They're not going to help your kids. If the police encounter a person when they are concerned that the person has done something wrong, and that could be speeding, or it could be shoplifting, or it could be just a suspicious interaction on a street corner, then the police are coming into it with the assumption that they are looking for bad guys and are hoping to catch one. So the assumption that if you didn't do anything wrong, you should just cooperate and do what the police ask, that's just not true. The police can make your lives miserable even if you have never done anything wrong.
And I think that's, in my experience at least, that is more important for kids and teens to understand, because, of course, as much as they hate to hear it, our teens are naive and inexperienced. And also, in my experience, although the overwhelming majority of the police, I think, are good people doing a hard job, the ones that will push the envelope a little will be pushing the envelope with the people who seem less enfranchised, less empowered, and people too young to vote are certainly in that category.
That's absolutely true. I'm a prosperous middle-aged white guy. The police are not likely to hassle me. And I'm more worried about my kids, also white, but they're, obviously younger and more likely to have trouble in interactions with the police.
So when we're talking about interactions with the police, what to teach our kids to do, I know, for example, my oldest son had an interaction with the police where he was looking back and talking to the public defender who had him, and speaking to a couple of people I know in the system. It seems fairly clear that what they wanted was the names of some bad people that my son knew. And one of the things they did to try to get him to give those names was to go ahead and arrest him. He got released on his own recognizance 36 hours later. Charges were dropped almost immediately. But that was a tactic they used. And they used that tactic the second he said, you know what, I would feel more comfortable having this conversation with a lawyer. What should we teach our kids to do if the police approach them and talk to them about something, whether they did it or not? Or actually, let's split those two. If they haven't done anything and the police are talking to them, what should we teach our children to say?
So I'm going to push back against the did something wrong, didn't do something wrong distinction, because you don't necessarily know if the police are interested in learning the names of bad guys from your son. Maybe the police think that interaction shows that your son was engaged in some kind of criminal conduct with them. maybe that's not true. I don't know, and I'll point out you don't know either.
Yeah.
I mean, he's your son, and you trust him, and I won't push back against that. But the police are interested in evidence, not in some sort of larger abstract truth. And evidence that your son is connected to a bad guy is evidence that could be used against your son in court in the trial against your son in his criminal trial. So it is not super useful to think about whether you did a bad thing or did not do a bad thing. That just doesn't help a lot in the strategy. Evidence matters, but you will not know the evidence, and the police will not tell you. You do not have that information when you are choosing what to do. And so the easiest rule to remember, and there are some complexities, and I can get into that, but the easiest one is don't give the police any information they don't already have. Don't answer questions. And so your son handled that correctly. It may be that if he had given information, he would not have been arrested. But it may also be that if he had given information, he would have been arrested anyway, and he would have been in jail for longer. There's no way for us to know. But in light of the stakes, in light of the possible bad outcomes and the possible good outcomes, having not given the information is probably the way that he has the best outcome in that genuinely difficult situation.
That's fairly generalizable. I think I'm hearing you say that if the police want information, they don't get new information until you've spoken to a lawyer who says to go ahead.
Yes. I mean, the only time that wouldn't be true would be if the stakes are quite low and the information is minor. If the police pulled me over for speeding, and I had definitely been speeding, I was sure they knew it and could prove it, then I might choose to admit it and apologize rather than pushing back. Probably not, but that is the only time I can think of. And that's where you are essentially making a bargain with the police officer. You're agreeing not to make their lives difficult and asking that they choose as a result to give you a warning rather than a ticket. Like, that might work, but that's true where the stakes are inherently low. The worst outcome is a ticket, where I haven't done anything bad. I don't think they're worried about something worse, so I don't expect it to escalate. And even then, that one to me is a hard question. All the others are easy, where you just do not give them any new information at all.
And so now you had mentioned that there was some complexities about that you'd like to go into. What are those complexities?
Well, so the first one is you don't have to give the police information, except in some states, you have to give them your name. That is not always true, but it often is, and it's not going to hurt anything. If they want to know your name, they can figure it out. And then there are a lot of things that are not the same as talking, for which the rules are different. They might ask if they can look inside your car. And the answer to that is no. You just don't let the police look inside your car. They probably cannot insist. They probably can't punish you for refusing, and you're entitled to refuse. If they have the power to look inside your car, they can do that. You shouldn't stop them, but you don't have to give them permission. And that's not quite the same thing as answering questions, but it's similar. If the police tell you to do something, if they say, get out of the car, if they say, hand me that bag, if they say, come stand over here, you just have to do it. The police can give you orders. It is often a crime to fail to follow those orders. It is absolutely a bad strategy that will make the police angry in a way that you will be sorry about. So if they tell you to do things, you have to do them. If you're not sure if it's an order or a request, you can ask, because the police are good at making that line blurry. But if they order you to do things, you just have to do them. That is about physical movements or about giving permission, not about talking. They can't order you to talk and probably will not.
And that brings up a question. This is a rumor I've heard and read that seems real, but you would know and I don't, about in some places you're required to give them your name, in some places you're not. But in either case, everywhere, it's illegal to lie to them about it. So it's okay to say I'm not answering that, but it's not okay to just spin a falsehood. That's often a crime.
Absolutely. Lying to the police is a terrible, terrible strategy. probably a crime, definitely make them angry. You should not do that.
Excellent. And I had a question there for a moment, and then you were talking about something interesting, and I forgot it for just a second. We were talking about searching. We were talking, lawful orders, and I think this is something that we absolutely should express to our teens and our young adult children, that even if the order seems unfair, even if you don't like it, even maybe especially if you know or think you know that it's not okay for them to order you to do that, they're on the side of the road with the lights flashing is not the time to argue with the officer. That is the time to record and remember and have your lawyer duke it out with them later.
Absolutely. Never argue with the police. It's not an argument you're going to win. And like that ties into what it is you're hoping to accomplish. The police have heard every excuse. They are used to dealing with people who are more difficult than you. It is not going to help to argue with them. And even if you are being uncooperative, if you're being uncooperative and polite, then they are going to be less difficult and less angry and less hostile than if you are being uncooperative and also combative and rude. If the police pulled me over, I would not be helpful to them, but I would absolutely be polite and not try to make their jobs harder, because that's only going to work out badly for me. I can say, no, officer, I'm not going to do that, without spitting and yelling and calling him pig.
One police officer friend of mine, and again, we're having a very adversarial approach towards dealing with the police, because they're on the other side of the chessboard in a very real way. But most police officers are good people doing a hard job. One of them has said to me over and over, and I'm not sure, I don't think it's original to him. I think I've heard it other places about, he's never been talked out of arresting someone or giving somebody a ticket, but he sure as heck has been talked into it.
I've heard that too. And I bet it's true. I think that it is possible that under exactly the right circumstances, a genuine expert could talk the police out of arresting them. Maybe not. And it's definitely not a good strategy. Like, I might consider it depending on what they were telling me, if they said they were looking for somebody who'd robbed a bank and I could easily prove I was in the wrong place, then I'd at least consider it. Probably not, because being arrested and winning in court is better than being arrested and having some new bad evidence against me that I didn't understand when I was speaking. And for anything else, you're just not going to. The police are going to make their choice, and that's based on the information that they have. Giving them more information is not going to make the calculus better for you.
Oh, that makes sense. And again, you're talking about some of that calculus as a middle-aged, middle-class white lawyer, which is a very different position than a 17-year-old who's had their license for 9 months, whose buddy is a minority in the car, and they've been pulled over. And harassment may be a strong word, but in some cases it might not be.
It might not be. And honestly, I don't know what those interactions at the side of the road look like. I may have somebody come to me and they say the police looked in the trunk of the car and they did not have permission, and they found something illegal. They found marijuana. They found a firearm that should have been secured differently. And the police report says the police asked for permission and got it. And I have no idea which of those things is true. I have no way of figuring it out. I just have two witnesses who are saying different things to me. And so I am skeptical that anybody actually knows what those encounters generally look like. Individual police officers know what the encounters look like when they are there. The people who are there know, but otherwise, there's no way to know.
What's the old saw about there's three sides to every story, your side, my side, and what actually happened?
And really, there can be more sides than that if you've got a couple more witnesses.
And I think part of that is because everybody in that situation, like an average traffic stop, everybody's a little bit adrenalized. The person behind the wheels worried about a ticket. The officer coming up to the car is worried about getting shot by some felon with a warrant who he just happened to have the bad luck to pull over. So neither of those people are necessarily in the right hormonal and neurochemical state to have a real handle on exactly what's going on.
That's a good point. That's a reason not to make difficult choices while you're under those circumstances. The easy one is to refuse to talk, and the harder one is to choose what you want to talk about. And with that adrenaline, it's hard to do those things correctly.
and then cast back our minds to when we were 17 and how much good sense we had on a good day. And so it sounds like the best advice that I could give a teenage child in my life is just answer the question about who you are, hand over the paperwork if you're being pulled over. But other than that, don't answer questions.
Yeah, don't answer questions. Be as polite as you can about it. And this could be something like, well, it helps to say that you want to see a lawyer if the police are pushing back on answering questions. Saying, I want a lawyer is a sort of magic word, magic phrase that requires the police to stop questioning you. But just saying, I don't want to answer questions as politely and as clearly as possible and answering all questions that way is as good an outcome as you're going to have.
Out of curiosity, with clients that you've represented people who've had you on a retainer, how often do people who know better than to talk to the police successfully not talk to the police?
I don't know, because when people successfully don't talk to the police, the case is much less likely to end up on my desk. The times that people talk to I think the answer is that not talking to the police is not that difficult, but a lot of people think that they are smarter and they can get away with talking to the police, and they are usually wrong. That is a bad choice to make. And also, if we're talking about folks who have come to me, then they were caught doing something worse also. We are not talking anymore about speeding. We are talking about drunk driving, or we're talking about possession of something much more illegal. And so the stakes are higher. And that's a time when not talking and not giving the police anything is a lot more important. When I talked about talking to the police a little bit in the hopes that they will be nice and not give you a ticket, that makes sense if we're talking about a ticket. But if we're talking about anything more serious, that outcome is no longer possible. There is no chance that they're going to stop investigating driving under the influence because they think you have been polite and cooperative. Absolutely no way.
That kind of brings to one of the through lines from many interviews I've done on the show is the importance of having a plan and rehearsing that plan. And in some ways, this is exactly like your family fire plan, where with family fire plan, something has suddenly gone very wrong in that situation where you're afraid, where you got the adrenaline pumping, and there are some real stakes if you do it wrong. That should not be the first time that you're trying whatever it is you're doing. And I could see some value in having and rehearsing you just got pulled over plan with our teenagers.
That's probably a good idea, but the plan is don't talk.
Yeah.
And then there's probably a plan about getting in touch with the parents.
Yeah.
I mean, it is never going to hurt anything to know a lawyer and have a lawyer on retainer. But lawyers are expensive, and most people just do not need to have a criminal defense lawyer available to them for questions in the middle of the night. And in practice, the lawyer is unlikely to be all that helpful under those circumstances. The lawyer can show up in the morning and try to get bail, but it's probably not worth the expense to figure out that plan early. It can't hurt to try to figure out a person you want to talk to, because finding a lawyer who you can trust and will feel comfortable with, that's a difficult process. And that's something where you really want to ask around, talk to, if you know a lawyer in another field, or if you know a police officer or somebody else who has some connection to the criminal justice system, that's a way to find somebody to give you a recommendation. But otherwise, that's hard to do. Looking for a lawyer from I don't suppose it's the yellow pages anymore, looking online, it's hard to figure out if they know what they're doing and they're going to be helpful to you. The lawyers know, and the judges know, and the police officers know, but the clients, it's hard to understand. The same way, I don't know if my doctor's doing a good job or if my plumber is doing a good job. They have expertise that I don't have, and I can't easily judge whether they are adequately performing their duties. And lawyers are the same.
Yeah, when my son got arrested, I asked a couple of law enforcement officers in the local area, okay, who is it that when they walk into the court and that you just start cussing immediately? Who's that guy? That's the guy I want. And yeah, we ended up speaking to three different lawyers, and one was definitely not a good choice. One was probably a good but very expensive choice, and the other one was very scrupulously honest. He actually looked at the paperwork, got the name of the DA, got the name of the public defender, and said, "Dude, you're fine. You don't need to give me money."
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's often true. Like public
yeah.
defenders are like teachers. They tend to be overworked and underpaid,
Mm-hmm.
but also a lot of them are true believers. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
them, they handle hard cases regularly. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a way to get good at something. If a public defender might go to trial with a bad set of facts once a week for years, expensive lawyers don't do that. And there are a lot of reasons for that. That is not to say that you can't find very good lawyers who you're paying for, but public defenders have an undeserved bad reputation. Like anybody else, some are good and some are bad, but it is just not true that if you have a public defender that you should do everything you can to hire a lawyer. That is not a good strategy.
And that's also not realistic for a lot of families, especially working families right now.
Well, and especially when you're at the edge like that, if you're trying to figure out if you can scrape together a couple of $1,000s to hire the cheapest lawyer you can find, that's definitely going to be worse than sticking with the public defender. If you honestly have the money and you can go and put up the many thousands of dollars that it will cost to have a lawyer handle your driving under the influence case, maybe that's an improvement, maybe not. But if you can only afford the very cheapest lawyers, you're probably better off staying with public defender.
That's really good to know. I think a lot of people, myself included, were under the impression that most public defenders were not great. I think because of the reputation you see on the media.
They're very, very busy. And that's bad. Like if the system worked correctly, then there would be more public defenders or fewer cases, and each one would handle a smaller caseload. That's how it should work, and that's not how it works now. But folks go into that because they believe in it. And so most of them are doing their very best against a difficult system, and they are going to understand the system very well. They deal with it regularly, as opposed to somebody who is doing divorce law and personal injury and occasional criminal defense, who is just not going to be as familiar with the system and is not going to work it as well. And there's a lot of generalization that I'm doing there, and obviously that is a difficult thing to do accurately, but it is not correct that public defenders are just bad lawyers and you can do better. That's not the right way to look at it.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, that most of them are almost certainly going to be better than your cousin who mostly does corporate law that your mom wants you to hire.
You definitely want a lawyer who does criminal defense as a significant chunk of their practice. It's not just about knowing what the law is. It's about knowing the people, having a relationship with the prosecutor, having an investigator you work with regularly, knowing what experts you're going to need. There are lots of parts of a criminal practice that either are in place or they're not. But if that's not something that you're doing regularly, then you're not going to be set up to handle it. And so that's a reason why you want somebody who does that a lot.
And that's one of the things that I'm getting out of this call, is that applies very much to the interactions with the police in the moment. That, these public defenders, they know the game, they play the game, they know everybody involved. They're professionals at this thing. Where when you get pulled over or you get questioned at a party by a police officer, as a teenager, as a 21-year-old, you are an amateur at having this interaction. Whereas the police officer, this is the 30th of these interactions he's had today. He is a seasoned professional at this thing. And so we should not think that we're going to beat them at that game.
No, you absolutely should not. And so the way you avoid losing is don't play. Don't answer questions.
So there's one particular point as a parent that I think requires a little bit of examination, and that is, there's a point from when your kid is born, for many, many years, for most of their time in their house, where they are a minor and the rules are different. And then they go away and they're in college and they're an adult and the rules are different. But there's that special little spot, their senior year of high school, where they're a high school kid who is over 18. And when it comes to the justice system, I think that requires special care and handling. Can you comment on that at all?
Well, I think it is true that people remain immature in a meaningful way until their early or mid 20s.
Man, I'm still working on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it is definitely true that an 18-year-old, once you move out of the juvenile justice system into the criminal justice system, that is a worse place for most people. And it is certainly true that if 3 kids are off getting into trouble and one of them is 18 and the other 2 are 17, the 18-year-old is going to be pulled out of that process and put in a worse process. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. It is definitely true that 18-year-olds are at somewhat more risk, but it doesn't affect a lot what kind of advice I'm giving here.
Oh, good.
The advice would be the same if you were concerned about a driving under the influence charge or a murder charge. It just doesn't make a difference. And when you're talking about more fine-grained tactical choices, you're just not going to do that. That's for the lawyer to do. Don't consider that at all.
And so it's same advice on the day before their 18th birthday as after, which is give them your name, don't lie, follow orders, and don't answer questions.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, Rankin, I really appreciate you coming on today to tell us what you know. I think a lot of parents have a lot of misconceptions, a lot of concerns and worries about this. I'm pleasantly surprised at how simple the conversation is, because the law is more complex than people probably think if they're not lawyers, but still very complex. But the advice of, listen, don't answer questions. But before I let you go, what's the smart question I should have asked you, but I didn't?
I think you've covered it. It is easy to think in the moment that if you don't do what the police want, they're going to think you're a bad guy. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And really, you won't know. You won't know what the police think. But the thing to remember is it doesn't matter if the police think that you are a bad guy. It matters if the jury thinks you are the bad guy. Keep in mind what the stakes are for your interaction with the police. It's lousy if you are late because the police are being insistent on you answering questions or you letting them look in the car or some other thing you don't want to do. It's unfortunate if you're late. It's unfortunate if you get a ticket. But when you are interacting with the police, you should also be thinking about going to jail. You should think about the police being unhappy enough or frightened enough that you are injured. The bad outcome in dealing with the police is a terrible, terrible bad outcome. And if you don't talk and they're mad and they think you may be a bad person and they write you a speeding ticket because they are angry, that's a win. That's a good outcome. When you are dealing with the police, keep in mind what the stakes are.
And when teaching our kids how to deal with the police, teaching them that, simplifying things about don't answer questions. And I don't think we go amiss to talking to our kids about breathing exercises and other things to keep them calm in that moment.
It's a stressful situation, but also, a kid who's driving should be paying attention to how to deal with stressful situations and what to do when they're scared or surprised or things aren't going what they wanted. Like that is a regular part of life. And dealing with the police is stressful and frightening. But as you say, we deal with stressful and frightening things. Part of growing up is learning how to control yourself in that situation and make the choices that you need to make.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. And if anybody wanted to find out more about what you do and what you write, where would be the best place to find that stuff?
Sure. So I've got a website, rankinjohnson.com. And that's got a little bit about criminal law and more about my writing. I'm working on selling a hard-boiled mystery novel. Most of my work is doing work for other lawyers, but I do occasional appeals and post-conviction relief, other post-trial things in the state of Oregon. And lawyers are easy to find. You look on the bar website, you'll find me there. You look on my website, you'll find me there. So So thank you very much for having me here. This is an interesting topic, and I think it's really important for people to understand what their rights are and what they should be doing when they're dealing with the police. And it's something that a lot of people do not really know how to deal with. So thanks
Really,
for having me on.
thank you for coming on. Have a great day, and everybody have a great day too, and we'll see you next time.